Welcome to Season 2 of Frontline Fridays, brought to you by Ubik. I'm your host, Ron Thurston, and this season, we're digging deeper into what it really takes to lead on the front lines of retail and hospitality. Together, we'll unpack the biggest shifts in frontline work and how smart leaders are navigating them to drive results where it matters most. Each episode, you'll hear from top executives, industry experts, and powerhouse operators, all sharing practical tactics you can put to work immediately. Today, we're zeroing in on one of the hardest parts of leadership, accountability. Get it wrong, and you lose your people. Get it right, and you unlock their best work. It's a balancing act that takes clarity, compassion, and real discipline. And my guest, April Sabral, has spent her career helping retail leaders get it right. April's career spans more than 30 years in retail. She's led teams at iconic brands like Starbucks, Gap, Banana Republic, and DAVIDsTEA. Having grown up in the industry, she knows what it takes to lead on the sales floor and beyond. What defined her was the belief that accountability and compassion don't have to compete. In fact, they fuel each other, and that thread runs through everything she's done. Today, she's an author, a leadership and mindset expert, and the founder of Ask April AI, her newest venture that brings coaching and training tools directly to frontline leaders. Over the years, April has trained hundreds of managers at brands like Jimmy Choo, Tory Burch, and Sunglass Hut. Her first book, The Positive Effect, has been widely used by retail teams as the foundation for their training programs and sets the stage for important conversations. Her latest book, Positive Accountability, just hit shelves. April and I have had the chance to collaborate several times over the years, and I always value her perspective on what great leadership really takes. It's the Ron and April show again. We are back. I don't think that there's anyone listening that probably hasn't heard us together somewhere along the way of the last 5 years. I'm really honored and happy to have you on this particular show because this show is so driven just for the front line, and that's your love. Those are our people that you and I have grown up with, where we put our energy and our effort and our love. And so I'm really happy that you're here.
Me too. I'm so excited. I have been listening along and following along the first season, I think. So I'm really excited to be here and honored too. So thank you.
You're welcome. And you and I do live in the same city, but we are not in the same city today. So we're doing this virtually, but we will continue to do things in person together and, around the world as our businesses grow.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about how we met in our journey? I've already introduced your background, but tell us just a little bit about you and me.
Yeah, I mean, we met in just around the pandemic, right? We were both writing books. You were writing Retail Pride. It
was 2019, yeah.
Yeah, 2019, yeah, through LinkedIn, through a LinkedIn connection.
Yeah.
This is why I think LinkedIn is so great. And just saw that you were writing a book and I was writing a book, and I was in New York and reached out, and you invited me to the office, and we just have been friends ever since. Like, that's how we met, literally,
It's exactly how we met. And I think, again, for everyone listening and thinking about the relationships that you build in this industry and the importance of really growing your career in many ways. But you and I were at a place where we've taken our experiences and then building other platforms and other businesses. And I want to dig into that with you today. But that the networking part of our industry never stops.
Never stops. And I think about that a lot of times, right? Like, if I hadn't reached out, if you hadn't connected with me, if I hadn't, said yes to that meeting in New York, if I hadn't made the effort, because my career was not in the States, it was in Canada. And I think I was living in Canada at that time.
I think
so. Happened to be in New York for a couple of days, and we met up. So yeah, it's so important, networking.
So fun. So let's jump into your latest projects. So tell us about Positive Accountability to start.
Yeah, Positive Accountability is a passion project, a book, another business leadership book that really has come out of training the positive effect for the last 5 to 6 years. And the framework I was using at DAVIDsTEA when I was running Frontline and stores, and we had implemented it across the chain with 250 locations, and we saw it work because it just clarified what accountability was. And as I've been training the positive effect, this framework is the one that stands out every time out of the multiple frameworks. And now there's a book come out of it. And I think I was training it last year to a large retail organization, and they just were like, how do we do more of this? And I was like, you know what, I'm going to write a book about it. And like literally that's how it happened. So yeah, I'm excited about it coming in September, October. Sorry.
And for you, having led really iconic brands, we've both been so honored to do that for really important companies and really on a global scale. Why is the conversation about accountability the one that everyone seems to, I won't say struggle with, but maybe feel less confident about?
Yeah, I would say struggle with.
You would say struggle. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I was having a conversation this morning with the CEO and talking to him about accountability and just walking through the steps. And he said, oh yeah, like our team really struggles with that. He actually used that term. And I think it's because accountability evokes feelings of conflict or confrontation because it's associated with poor performance, right? Like, this has gone wrong. Now I need to deal with it. And now I need to have a conversation. And I don't feel confident, which is what you just said, about that conversation. It's the human skills, those soft skills of being able to deliver feedback that may not be positive, right? And so I think people get hooked up and think that's what accountability is. And there is a piece of that in the accountability framework, but it's far more than that. For us, we think about accountability as ownership and transferring responsibility. And that is powerful and not just a conversation around performance. It's actually getting ahead of that. Because those steps are missed, that's why people struggle, because they just think of accountability like a performance conversation.
Right.
And so we kind of demystify that. But people struggle with giving people feedback that may not be positive because we work in a very relationship-driven business. Right? Retail is all relationship driven. You know people you work with, and you know this as well as I do in the stores more than you know your own family sometimes, right? Because you build those bonds. And then you're like, how do I hold this person accountable because I know them now, they're my work friend, and it gets complicated, right? So I think that's why people struggle, because they think it's one thing, and it's not just that one thing.
Yeah, and as I'm listening, you think about other competencies like conflict resolution, that is very different than accountability. And it is a different skill in that way. And both are important because conflict among humans is natural, but that's not accountability.
No. That's not accountability. That's dealing with something in the moment as it arises, with a differing of opinions or perspectives or misunderstandings or emotional reactions to things. But accountability, like I said, it's like creating and transferring ownership so that the other person can take full responsibility. That's really what accountability is. It's like, I think in the first book I wrote a chapter on called Account Plus Ability. Like, you're just accounting for people's abilities. Like, and also accountability is development. If you see it as it's development for somebody, you'll be excited about it because you're now shifting your mindset around it. It's not like a dreaded conversation. It's actually a development conversation.
It also feels like we sometimes make assumptions that people don't want to be held accountable. And I believe, and likely you do too, being led and strong leadership capabilities, including the ability to be held accountable, is what actually people want.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think we're afraid to admit it, or we're afraid to say, I actually like being held accountable for this, or having deadlines, or showing up in a certain way, showing up with pride, as I speak about. That's pride is holding yourself accountable.
Right. And I think also, Ron, it's like when you think back to our careers and even now in the businesses that we run, we take ownership and responsibility, and it gives you that sense of pride because you are owning it. And I was reading a study around employees and working on a presentation around employees and what they want in the workplace, and they want career development. And along with that career development comes ownership and responsibility. That's one of the things that they actually want. So again, it's really demystifying it so that we don't get hooked up on it. It's like just a performance conversation. Pride, ownership causes pride, right? It creates that level of like, I'm responsible for this and I get to do something about it, and I get to create things and innovate things and, create amazing experiences. And I think that's where we need to start. It's like, I don't know. I had moments in my career, like I'm sure you did, where people said to me, if you don't do this, you're not going to get that. And I was like, okay, I get to go home and think about that and think about, what do I get to do? What decision do I get to make, and own my part in it so that I can get where I want to be. Right?
Right.
Super important.
Really important. And it requires your teaching skills to newer managers about how to do that. You're modeling that behavior of what holding someone accountable is. And so maybe if you could walk us through just the tool that you teach in this accountability wheel, that would be really helpful for the audience.
Yeah, there's 9 steps. So there's a personal accountability wheel that reflects for me personally as a leader, and then there's a team one. So I'll go through the team one, I guess, because that's the one that, well, I say both, but most people struggle with this. So there's 9 steps, and it starts off with the right person in the right role. If we don't have the right person in the right role, and you know this because you work with people on hiring and recruitment, right? So it's like, right person in the right role. So assuming we've got the right person in the right role, I'm going to make that assumption because I always assume positive intent, always. I've been too many times given teams where people have said, yeah, the whole team needs to change, and, like gave me the whole Coles notes on everybody. And I'm like, hold on a second. I don't even know these people. I haven't worked with them. Right. Which I'm sure you're nodding. So you're like, yeah.
I've had the exact same situation.
Yeah. So I always would go in with positive intent and say, okay, I'm assuming I have the right people in the right role. The second thing I'm going to do is make sure that everybody has a clear understanding of expectations. And the key word there is understanding, not just clear expectations. Like, I may think that I've been clear, but do they understand what's expected of them? And how do I know that? So that's the second step. Yeah. The third one is agreeing to mutual consequences if the expectations aren't met. So, my experience with that was when my regional director at the time said, if you can't transfer all of your to-dos to your team, you're never going to get promoted and do more. Like, you will not have multiple stores if your team can't stop calling you on a day off. And I went home and thought, God, he's right. I'm not going to get promoted if I can't do this. That's an example of how simple that is, but it's a very misstepped. And then we go into developing an action plan, and then we go into course correcting as needed. Step number 6 is like, be consistent, be involved. That's not micromanaging. That's being supportive. Then the next one is assuming nothing. So we make a lot of assumptions. People's already done this. They already know this. They came with these skills already. When I interviewed them, they told me that they knew this, right? But we don't know until somebody's working with us, and our expectations might be different than the other companies that they were working with. Then we recognize performance if it's done well and right. And then if the outcome is not successful, you go back to number 1 and you say, is the right person in the right role? And that's when you make that decision. You don't make that decision until you've actually followed those steps. Too many leaders I see give somebody a direction, tell them to do something. The person doesn't meet their expectations. And then they're like, okay, well, they're not the right person on my team. They're not a good fit. They don't have the skills. They don't have the passion, all of these assumptions. And then they let them go. And the thing is, we work in a very high turnover environment. Holding on to your people is key because it's better for the business, not holding on to the wrong people, but setting up the right people for success,
And of the 9, when you're teaching it, what is the one that you feel like people have the biggest challenge with?
It's really interesting. Setting up clear expectations and making sure people understand them. And I think, I think it's really truly because it requires effort and time. So if I'm asking you to do something or delegating something to you, and I'm not taking the time in that moment to say, hey, walk me through, or what did you hear me say, or tell me what you think your approach is going to be. Help me make sure and validate that you really understood what I asked you to do, which requires effort and patience and a teaching approach. Then you're not sure. And so a lot of people miss that step. I was having lunch with somebody yesterday who has their own business, and they were saying about somebody on their team that's not working out. And I asked her if she had done that. And she said, oh, but that means that I have to like take the time to do that. And I said, yeah, you know, like you can't just tell somebody something and think that that's it and then be frustrated. So that's where it goes wrong a lot of the time.
Because the rest of the steps after that one really can't be executed in a way that makes sense if you can't do that part of it.
Yeah. And also you've managed high performers, right? Like when you've managed teams, I've managed high performers. So we make an assumption that everybody is going to be like a high performer, self-driven, self-motivated, self-learning, which we were because that's how we reached where we were in our careers. But if you go back to like when we measured performance in our roles, we didn't have 90% of the company as all high performers. It's just not possible. If you look at any statistics in any organization, it doesn't work like that. So we have to train and develop, especially in retail, where it's a lot of first-time job seekers, even hospitality, right? Like there is no school roadmap for this. We're teaching people every day. And I think sometimes at the senior levels, they forget that they forget they have to take that approach.
I agree. And I think the flip side is if you don't do this, or you do it for some and not others, and there's a lot of statistics around not managing underperformer, that's accountability.
100%.
And so you're right. Peak performers, the people you're describing, the probably 10%, top 10%, have very little patience for the fact that you will do nothing and not hold other people accountable. Do you see that showing up too in maybe some of these workshops?
Yeah, because you know as I do that people that are high performing want other people to be held responsible at the same standard. Right. And so that can create misalignment in teams, mistrust, demotivate high performers, when that's not being, accountability is not aligned. Like if you were going to ask 10 people, interview 10 people on this show or anybody, you're at a dinner party and you ask people at the table, what does accountability mean to you? It's kind of like saying, what does leadership mean to you? You're going to get 50 different answers, right? Just
I'm gonna try that. I actually like this activity.
Just try it. Like the next team you work with, the next dinner table you have, or whoever, anybody watching the show, just go ask your team, like, what does accountability mean? And you'll get 10 to 20 different answers. And that's a problem in itself because then there's not a clear expectation about what it actually means. So how are we executing on it? And so I see that a lot, but getting alignment, people like clarity. I don't know about you, but do you like clarity? I do. It helps me know exactly what I need to get done and where I'm going, right?
Yes. And what is the goal? What does success look like? Is it statistical? Is it emotional? Like what is success? How do I create personal accountability, team accountability in order to achieve that goal? If all of this is very gray and mysterious, your likelihood of achieving the goal that, again, someone else has probably set for you, in my opinion, was very low.
Yeah.
That clarity of what do we need to do? How do we need to get there? What is the accountability? What are the steps? This wheel. That's how you achieve goals.
Yeah. And
it's not an accident.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we forget, right? And leaders forget when they have a title that people are just going to nod and act like they understood because they're fearful a lot of times of saying that they didn't get it. I can remember so many times in my career where I was sitting in a room and I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about right now, but I'm not going to be the one in the room to put my hand up and say, can somebody explain it to me? Like, what does that acronym mean? And what does this mean? And I would just go along with it. And then I'd go and ask like 5 other people outside the room, like, what was that about? Like, what do I need to do? Here's the side meaning.
They probably didn't know either.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's like, then you got to remember that. Make that assumption when you're going in sometimes that when you're sharing an expectation, you're in a room full of people and you have a title that people are going to agree with you a lot, but it doesn't mean to say that they understood. It just means that they don't want to look a certain way in front of a whole group of people, because psychological safety is real, right? When it comes to performance and workplace culture and all of that stuff. And the problem is, if you don't have clear accountability processes and create ownership and responsibility to your team, you're going to be very tired as a leader. You're going to be worrying all night. I know I've had those nights where I've been like, oh my God, I wasn't clear. Did they understand? I was worrying and things weren't getting done. I'm like, was it me? Was it them? Like, stressful, right? That's when burnout starts happening, because your brain is worrying and overthinking about the wrong things. You can't rest at night. You can't have peace. And then you start doing everything yourself because you're like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. Like, and you start stepping in, and that's never a good thing, because you're going to get really tired.
Yeah.
You know?
And it feels like this is a skill that the earlier you master it, the better it is for your career.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, don't you find a lot of times, like now, because you have a lot of things to get done, right? As an entrepreneur and a business owner, a lot of times you can just go at it and then step back and go, hold on a second, like there's other people on that I could get to do this, or maybe I could find somebody to help me with this. And I think that's another thing. We, at all levels, I think you have to master it on Frontline 100%. But I think at all levels, you have to catch yourself. Because at all levels, you're going to have that human behavior of like, I just want to get it done. I can do it faster than anybody else because I know this more than anybody else. But then how do you build a team? Like, how do you sleep at night? I don't know.
I don't know either, because the more responsibility you have, the more important this skill becomes. This is why I love this deep dive on this topic, because I believe it is, I'm so happy writing a book about this, because this will hold people back. And I think it's exactly what you said of, if I don't learn how to hold myself accountable first, and therefore teach those skills and learn how to communicate, test for understanding, all of this is the unlock to successful leadership. You said to ask at a dinner party what leadership is. You will get very different answers depending on the industry you work in. But ultimately, if you asked people to describe the best leaders, I think that they would use this and say they actually knew how to hold people accountable. They knew how to deliver great results through their team. They transferred ownership and skill. Like, they didn't hold it all in. And they taught me how to do that along the way. I think those are ways people describe great leaders.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, people can usually describe somebody that does it well. But then what we see the gap is, it's one thing being able to describe what's doing well. Somebody's doing well and you can see it and how it makes you feel. But then how do you train it? How do you teach it? And how do you scale it? And that's where I think frameworks are really important. Like, you have a framework now, right, with human pride. I mean, we grew up, like, I worked at Gap, Starbucks at the beginning of my career. They had acronyms and frameworks for everything. Like, everything.
A little bit of a joke, but it was true.
But it was true. But it kind of worked because it's stuck in the brain, right? Like, you can remember it and you can use it over and over again, and then you can teach somebody something else. Because I think when I became a John C. Maxwell coach when I was in 2016, when I was actually running stores for DAVIDsTEA, I did it because I wanted to figure out how to articulate what I did and then teach it to others, like have the language to teach it to others. I find in retail hospitality, a lot of times we have these amazing, great leaders that are doing this, but they don't know how to teach it to somebody else. So we need to give them the tools and the frameworks for them to be able to then teach it to other people, because that's really what makes you an exceptional leader, is when you can develop more leaders with that skill.
Right.
Yeah.
And then to your point, your role just becomes very much a leadership role than a manager. If we were going to define the difference, managing tasks, doing more, like, why wouldn't you really want to learn this skill, practice, and be good at it?
Well, you know,
ultimately it benefits you.
Yeah. I asked the CEO, why do you think CEOs, this is really funny, I asked him this morning, why do you think that there is CEOs out there that just don't buy into leadership development and training, like just don't invest in it? You do, so you're one of the ones that buy into it. But like, what do you think? And he said, I think that people get overwhelmed and focused on profitability and like driving the results. And so that's a very big, heavy load, right? Like if you're running a company, it's a heavy load and this is what your job and your priority is. And you can get overwhelmed, consumed by that. And then all the other things that come into it. He said, but he got told a long time ago, if he didn't learn how to invest in his people, he would never be successful and become like a CEO. So he just said, I just think people go in and get overwhelmed and they have a priority task list and then they just forget about it. It's not that they don't know it's important, but it just becomes further down the priority list, right?
Similar to you, I would push back on that of say, but if you don't, the harder that this gets or the larger the team grows, that the success rate's going to continue to fail.
100%. And we've seen that, right? Like in retail, you know, there's a big pressure on sales, right? Like huge pressures on sales. And I think if you go in with the mindset of like, I've got to sell, and this pressure of that, but you don't step back and be like, how am I going to help my people be motivated, inspired, trained, capable, that pressure is not going to go away. And honestly, the pressure is always going to be there. The goals aren't getting any smaller. If you do a 10% comp, they're going to ask you, you're going to need to deliver another 10% comp. It's like I learned in retail the skills of like, you can always be better. Yeah, like you can always improve. It doesn't matter if you hit the goal. There's a stretch goal. There's always a stretch goal. So you're going to have to hit those numbers, have that pressure. So do it in a way where people feel like they're learning and growing and you're sharing that with your team, you know, giving them the skills.
I wanted to ask you, because we're speaking specifically about accountability, but this kind of idea of that's not training and that's not coaching, like holding someone or teaching accountability is not that. So how do you define the difference between these very important competencies?
Yeah, when we train the workshops out, coaching, training, and directing are three things that we talk about. And then the accountability wheel is kind of like how you bring it all together as a roadmap. But I think a lot of leaders, because they don't have coaching skills or think about coaching, which if they don't have that, it will derail them because the second step is a kind of a coaching teaching approach, right, that we just talked about. So coaching is asking questions. It's like everybody relates to sports. There's always a team on the field with a coach at the sidelines coaching that team's performance, right? Looking at the play, looking at what could be done differently, providing a little bit of feedback, asking questions, trying to clarify if they understood, and then throwing that feedback back and coming up with suggestions. So coaching is a very two-way conversation. You have to be really good at listening and asking questions. Those are the two skills that really define coaching. And then directing is, you know, you're just giving some direction in the moment. It's like that customer needs help now. Like drop what you're doing, that task. You know, we used to say stop, drop, and roll, not roll, but like help the customer, you know, go help that customer. And that's directing, because if it's impacting a customer experience, and I'll talk about that because we're talking about retail, but if it's impacting an experience that can be changed now, then sometimes you have to step in direct. And then training is giving somebody information that is going to help them be better at their job, right? So whether it's a new task, whether there's a new process, whether it's a new product, training. And so we have, in our methodology, we have a coaching formula and then we have a training formula, and directing is just directing. Okay. But what we find a lot of the times is when we do these scenarios of like, is this training, directing, or coaching? Everybody gets it wrong. It doesn't matter what level they're at, because everybody thinks every conversation is a coaching conversation, and it's not. It's directing is not coaching. Directing is directing. You're just telling somebody, hey, go help that person now. Hey, can you go make sure that the door's closed on time? Hey, can you make sure that, you know, there's a hurricane coming? Can you get the shutters down? Like, it's direct. It requires an immediate response. You've read exit interviews, right? As like I have. And people say they leave because they didn't have a coaching conversation or they weren't developed. And it's a lot of times we're not calling out in the moment, hey, I'm having a coaching conversation with you right now. Like, do you have time for coaching? Then they'll know the difference. Hey, I want to train you on something right now. You know, let's train you and walk you through this. I think human beings, if we could just be better at communicating clearly, again, setting an expectation that you understand what we're doing right now, it would solve a lot of our problems. But, you know, that's where AI can't replace that, right? Like it can help us,
Yeah.
but it can't replace that.
It can't replace that. And also then don't assume that the recipient of that understands what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because in your mind, you're very clear, I'm training, I'm directing, I'm coaching, I'm having an accountability conversation. In your mind, you're very clear exactly what you're doing. I agree, but say the words. I'm going to give you very specific direction that I need you to do now.
Yeah.
Let's step out. I'd love to just have a coaching conversation. So I think that you're right. The language is actually very important here. Saying the words is really important part of I think leadership. And you're right, for people that are even learning work, I speak about this often, that a significant percentage of people start their career in retail. They may not stay, but it's a very common first job. So you're learning how to work. Like, what does that mean to show up for work? And if during that first or second job very early in your life, you've learned the difference between directing, coaching, holding yourself, and being accountable on a team. If you've learned those things, no matter what you do in life, they are important skills that you've just developed.
It's so true. And don't you get messages from people like 15, 20 years ago that worked for you and say, I remember when you said this to me, or I remember when you
Oh,
said that
yeah.
to me. You get those messages from people, right? That like, it changed the trajectory of my career. Now I'm doing XYZ, that they would have never maybe got there if you hadn't had those moments with them. It does
Yeah.
change people's lives. I think we have a huge impact on
Yep.
people in first-time jobs, frontline, man. It's just like, there's so many skills that people learn. I remember my son, his first job was at Burger King. He learned a lot in that job that's now helped him 6 years on.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
As we sit here in fall of 2025, the retail industry is under significant pressure. Like you said, like there's always a sales goal.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, it feels like the headcounts are smaller than they used to be. Pressure on margin puts pressure on payroll. There is a clear direct correlation to that. So we are at a time where the pressure and the expectations, and I think the challenges of the world around us are higher than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in these large rooms with these retail teams, what's your approach, and part B, how are they feeling? And how do you teach accountability when it's just one of many things that they need to learn?
Yeah, I think one of the things that comes up the most is mindset. Because everything that you just said feels very heavy, feels very worrisome, feels very, how do I move through this? There's so many things. And so mindset comes up a lot. And that comes from the second pillar in the book, create the mindset that is going to help you solve things positively, approach things positively. And we teach this thing called the above the line, below the line mindset leadership. Actually, it's not a new concept. It's been around a long time, but it's been
I learned it decades ago.
Yeah, me too. And I think it's funny. You'll appreciate this, but every time we teach this, we say in the room, has anybody ever heard of this? And maybe 2 hands go up in 200. So
wow,
our generation had it. So we need to bring some things are just you bring them back from the past and you make them more current, right? So that's really important to teach people that mindset matters, that approach to a learning mindset, being above the line, catching yourself, really helping people reframe. So understanding how the mind works, that we do, how many thoughts we have a day, the percentage of thoughts that are negative. So we already know that. That's a statistic. That's a National Science Foundation study, not my numbers. Knowing that with everything that we deal with, then we make people aware of that and then teach them how to overcome that, how to show up with letting go of those limiting beliefs and then adopting a positive mindset. Because if they can do that, they're not in fight or flight. They're in an open awareness state, and then they can use all of these tools and they're not stressed, because stress in itself causes a whole load of other problems. So I think one of the biggest things is when we use that above the line, below the line, and that mindset, the 3 R's, the reframing, releasing, and reaching for new thoughts, that's very powerful. And that's one of the things that I think comes up all the time is like, how do I be more positive? How do I stay positive? How do I lead my team more positively? Mindset's a big thing now. I think it always was, but now in particular, it comes up more than ever.
Kind of linked to mental health conversations and others. So as we wrap up, is there one thing everyone that's listening could do today, maybe around mindset, to get started on this journey?
Yeah, I think around mindset is thinking about becoming more aware of your thoughts. And I ask people in the workshops to like close their eyes for a minute, take a pause, count to 5 or 10, open their eyes, and then write down the thoughts that they are thinking. And then look at those thoughts and become aware of them, of how many could be negative or not serving you or a limiting belief. And then rewrite it out into a positive one. And if you can't believe it, just say, I'm choosing to believe a new thought. So you can really start to reshape it. Like, this goal that I've got is really stressful. I don't have traffic. We used to hear that in stores. I don't have traffic. I don't have this. I don't have that. Okay, so that is a reality. But how do you release that to reframe it, to reach for a new thought? And then maybe it's, I'm choosing to believe that my team have the capability to reach out and invite their customers in, or I'm choosing to believe that today we're going to do everything in our power to convert more, or I'm choosing to believe. So like, just that mindset shift, I think, is really important around mindset specifically. And then secondly, just take a teaching approach and learning skills. Like, if you can learn something new and teach somebody something new every day, you're going to see that exponentially compound over time. When people are more skilled, they feel more confident, right? They're going to engage more. Their brain's going to be open to more. And it feels good teaching other people as well. So I feel like being teachable, being a teacher, super powerful. And small things, you can literally, before I used to leave store visits, I used to say to them, what did I teach you today? What did you learn today from me being here that you didn't know before I walked in? And if they couldn't tell me something, I'd be like, okay, what do you want me to teach you? What do you want to learn before I leave? Because we know that when people learn, it inspires, it motivates, it evokes those positive emotions, and you're building capabilities. So that's really important.
Really important. And I would challenge everyone that learning mindset, don't wait for the company to do that for you. And they have resources. There are books. I have 2. You have several. Like, there are resources abundantly around to do this. Don't kind of sit and wait for your boss, for your company. Like, take this upon yourself. That's in my opinion, personal accountability.
Have a personal development plan. Where do you want to go, and what do you need to learn to get there? We have so many resources now, Ron. We have, like you said, videos, books, YouTube, all kinds of things, blogs, everything.
Podcasts.
You can learn so much compared to when we were growing up in the business, right?
That's true.
Yeah,
it's really
that's going to take you far.
Well, this has been so much fun, as always. You and I will continue this conversation offline like we always do. But thank you. Thanks for being on Frontline Fridays and for sharing your wisdom with the audience.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I feel really blessed and honored. So thank you.
If there's one big idea that I want you to take from this conversation, it's that accountability isn't the enemy of compassion. The real pressure on teams comes from uncertainty, but clear expectations is what builds confidence. And accountability starts with us as leaders, and it has to be personal before it can ever be cultural. Thanks for tuning in today, and a special thanks to Ubik, the presenter of Frontline Fridays. Ubik is the all-in-one platform that helps retail and hospitality leaders connect, train, and empower their teams. Ready to make your frontline your competitive advantage? Visit Ubik.com. That's YOOBIC.com to learn more. Until next time, keep leading boldly and keep empowering your people.